My name is Olga Murova, and I'm from the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics. And because of that, I will talk about the agriculture and climate change. I would like to start by asking you a question: what % of our annual income we spend on food in the United States? I would like to hear some of the numbers from you guys.
20%. 12%.
Lower?
15. Lower than
It's
9?
actually 6%.
Really?
Yes, whereas in most other industrialized or developed countries, people spend between 20 and 25% on food. So I guess this number shows us that there's plenty of food available at a very low price here in the United States. We do buy some goods from abroad. Even though we're self-sufficient, we don't have to do it, but because we would like to participate in international trade, we would like other countries to purchase some goods from us, and so we also have to keep some trade balance. We have to purchase some goods from abroad, but again, we don't have to do it, or in case of a national emergency, or if some emergency situation occurs, we can survive. We have enough supplies to survive for a while on having our own supplies. However, the global population and U.S. population is growing, and global population growing is at a faster rate, and we have to be ready to feed the growing world population in the future. So in 40 years, we'll have to increase our agricultural production by 70% globally to feed the world. So the concerns that we have currently is we need to increase agricultural production, agricultural productivity, but we have to do it with the current resources, and some of the resources that we have are the usage of these resources is going down. For example, the amount of agricultural land is getting smaller and smaller, not as much as in the earlier years, but still the amount of land available for agricultural production is getting smaller and smaller, and it is due to climate change. It is also due to urban development. We're losing some ag land to it, and so we need to produce more food with less resources. We have to be ready to do that. With that, I would like just to summarize some main economic approaches that are used in agricultural economics to measure climate change effects on agriculture. And so there are two main types of agricultural models that are used to conduct this type of research: structural models and spatial analog models. I will talk a little bit about the structural models. Structural models are used to measure economic consequences of climate change. Usually it's structural models represented by the crop simulation models. Crop simulation models allows us to estimate yields for different crops in different regions. We can expand these simulation models by adding up some conditions to them, like maybe we can talk about the different or consider different planting dates, different irrigation techniques. So all of this can be incorporated into the crop simulation models. And these yields that will be estimated with the crop simulation models can be used to estimate changes in acreage, supply, and market prices. But the main point of these models, all these models seek to minimize costs or maximize consumers and producers' welfare. So it's the first type of the models that look at the climate effects in agriculture, structural models. The second one is called spatial analog models, and these models allow us to use statistical or programming models to analyze changes in spatial patterns of production. There are two different approaches that are used here in these models. The first approach is a Ricardian approach. So based on economic theory, this approach allows us to put the value on farmland And this approach assumes that the farmland value will be based on economic theory that in a perfectly competitive economy, the value of farmland will be equal to the present value of total net revenues from this land, subject to some conditions. So this approach can be used in regression analysis. So different types of regression analysis can be used here to estimate the climate change effects on agriculture. The second type of models under spatial analog models are compatible equilibrium models or compatible general equilibrium models, CGE models, and usually they're used together with GIS models, and you probably have seen some of these models. What these models allow us to do, they allow us to not only look at the interactions of agricultural sectors, but we can include non-agricultural sectors into these models. And not only non-agricultural sectors, we can include different regions or global regions and see, together with the geographic information systems, we can see what would be the impact on global production or global price using these models. So CGE models together with GIS models allow us to look at the global regions and how the changes in climate will affect prices and production. So all these concerns, led us led ag researchers to conduct research that is relevant to climate change and the impact of the climate change on agriculture. But it also led to the development of this new term, climate smart agriculture. And this climate smart agriculture term actually consists of the three main parts: food security, adaptation, and mitigation. So food security, so some of the research is related to this food security issue, which is actually related to the increasing of agricultural productivity. Some of the research that we see in agricultural economics is related to adaptation, so adapting and building resilience to climate change. And the last type of research topics that we see, reducing and removing greenhouse effects emissions if and where it's possible. So of course, this implementing this approach, this climate smart agriculture approach is challenging because we still don't have that many tools, and we don't have our experience that we have in this area is relatively short term. So this is my kind of summary of how, what type of research we can conduct in agriculture that is related to climate, and the two main approaches to do it. Any questions, guys?
Thank you.
And I don't know how much time it took.
Questions?
Yes. You mentioned that we spend about 6% of our income on food.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include the federal price supports, the federal programs that we're paying taxes for?
I got this number from the U.S. Secretary of State when he was making his presentation recently. So I don't know what this number really includes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So it's 6%. I guess he was trying to make a point that how cheap and how that the food is really widely available in the United States.
And it's actually cheaper here than in other developed countries.
Right.
I mean, it's
It is
surprising how
much
cheap
cheaper.
food is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cheap here, but if we're going to be producing food sustainably, I think that people who eat are going to have to support some of that sustainability better, because the economics really favor agriculture, which is exploitive, not agriculture, not environmentally benign.
Yes, and that's why this first approach here to food security sustainably increasing. So resources are scarce. We have to come up with the best methods to use them, so we will not harm them or replenish them if it's possible, or keep them in the best possible state.
Dennis? And then Jenny?
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm always interested in econometric models and how they work and stuff, and they all have limits. But when I look at interactions between changes in climate and agricultural systems, particularly when you look at the fact that they're governed by farmers and their decisions, first thing I think of is Bayesian analysis. And I wonder, because the models are pretty mechanical and pretty limited in what they do, particularly structural models.
Mhm.
What are the efforts to try to make these things a little bit more dynamic, like with updates with farmers and stuff using Bayesian analysis? Seems to me that's a better way to go.
Yeah, and I guess you can, if it's a Bayesian analysis, maybe we can include it into this, maybe.
No,
part
I
of-
appreciate the additional
Or,
information, because
or
you need
maybe
that stuff, the original structural
can be,
models don't have.
part of the structural models
Yeah,
here.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, any economic model is always subject to some constraints.
Mhm.
And this is a problem. And we would like to have a model that would allow us to have a smaller number of constraints, and so the results will be more applicable. And it's always a challenge. And so, yes, we can try different approaches. And I haven't used Bayesian analysis, but I've heard about Bayesian analysis, that it's been widely used.
I mean, we use it in my discipline all the time, it's really, really
Just a sec.
good.
Jenny, and then
But
Richard.
anyway, thanks.
With these economic models, do you apply them across the whole country, or do you have, I'm thinking like climate zone specific approaches, because we know that the changes aren't gonna be the same across the whole country, and we're
Right.
gonna see differences in West Texas than we're gonna see in the Northeast
Yeah.
with food security and things like that.
So the structural models can be applicable to either individual region, or you can use several regions and apply the same model, or maybe make different assumptions for these two different models and compare results. But structural models are usually, we're looking at a certain region or certain crop, and we can run several of these models and compare the outcomes. Whereas the spatial analog, these are allow us to incorporate a set of regions and see how the system, global system, is working.
Richard.
About 45 years ago, plus or minus, I was a graduate student in atmospheric science at the University of Missouri, and the program there is part of the College of Agriculture. And the chairman, along with Decker, along with McQuigg, who had a joint appointment with the Department of Agriculture, they had funded big studies on climate change, the effect on agriculture and regions and so forth. What has changed? I mean, at the time, people were talking about the population bomb and, global warming. They were considering that effect on shifting the zones and so on. Other than the development of more tools, has there been any other factor that's entered in since that time, 45 years ago?
Well, I mean, as you pointed out, I would say that this spatial analog models are really models that would allow us to incorporate as many, possible conditions and into the model. I guess the concept of sustainability is very important today, whereas we didn't really care about it 50 years ago, right? Today we're so careful about using our resources. We want to preserve those resources as much as possible. I don't know, maybe.
I think we also recognize now how much more complicated it is.
Right.
Like back then, it was all about
Right.
CO2 is plant food, so there'll be large-scale fertilization of plants. But now we realize that it affects C3 versus C4 plants differentially, and weeds are going to grow faster, and pests are going to spread north. So I feel
Yes.
like it's a more nuanced, a more
Yeah.
complicated understanding these days.
And also, using the genetically modified seeds and crops
Yeah.
has
Right.
also brought a lot of change into these models and thinking about the effects of climate change on agriculture.
Great.
I think there was an
Next
article
question.
in the Avalanche Journal not too long ago talking about
Precision agriculture.
In other words, we can get a lot of data on, entire fields.
Oh yeah, very
remote
detailed
sensing and,
data.
a lot of different factors. And then it was mentioned that can be used by traders on the market to their advantage. So, I don't know if that's a real possibility. The traders could get data from the field, from the private companies that are doing this, or how does that factor into the models? That there's data, and then there's models, and then there's to the benefit of the farmer, to the benefit of the consumer, but then what if traders are entering in and looking to make a profit on is that a different type of model that has nothing to do with what you're doing?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, I don't do research in this area, but what I think about it is that, yes, there should be, this is a new type of research topics that are currently, should be researched, you know, and so we can find out more about it, how, if traders, first of all, they will have to purchase this information. I don't think this information will be readily available for them to get the information from the fields. And if they, if this information is available to them, that they can have an impact on, you know, they can have a really great impact on the. And again, I don't work in climate change, so I'm just guessing. It can change, yeah, it can change a lot of aspects in terms of. I don't know, they can impact the prices of those genetically modified seeds, for example, if they have such information at hand. And well, I better not elaborate on this because I don't know. I'll have to think about it and see what.
All right, well, thank
But
you.
it's-
Oh,
We
short
had a
comment?
spokesman here a number of years ago from Merrill Lynch, who was their climate crop guy, and he had personal contacts in the various fields, for example, in the Brazilian coffee fields and so forth, because the Brazilians, the growers wouldn't release like how low the temperature got and so forth, but he had contacts all over the world who provided that kind of information to him for the traders, so.
Interesting, yeah.
He didn't, I mean, he had to pay them, but he didn't pay any agency or things.
Great, thank you very much, Olga.
Thank you.